Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into the incredible world of large language models, LLMs, things like GPT-4, Claude, Llama, tools many of us use almost daily now.
Absolutely. They've really changed the game for getting information, writing text, even just, brainstorming.
They seem almost magical sometimes, so fluent, so versatile. But, and this is the twist, despite all that power, they actually share a subtle, kind of hidden flaw.
Intriguing. What are we talking about?
Well, that flaw is the core subject for us today. Researchers call it position bias, or sometimes the lost in the middle phenomenon.
Ah, okay. Lost in the middle. I've heard that term.
Exactly. So think of it like this. These super smart AIs, they tend to pay way more attention to stuff at the very beginning and the very end of a piece of text.
And the information in the middle gets short shrift.
Pretty much. Critical info tucked away there. It often gets, well, overlooked, like it's hidden in plain sight.
That sounds potentially quite problematic.
It does. In our deep dive today, it's all based on some really groundbreaking new research from an MIT team. Fresh off the press, detailed in ScienMag and their ARCAF paper.
MIT research. Okay, this should be good.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to really get what this bias is, understand its surprising roots in the AI's architecture, see how it impacts you in the real world, and then find out what researchers are doing to make these AIs more reliable.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
And yet this lost in the middle thing,
Oh,
it's fascinating because, as the MIT researchers point out, it's not just a tiny preference.
No.
No, they call it a perplexing phenomenon,
Yeah.
a subtle but critical limitation. It means information can literally get, lost. There's a real drop in accuracy retrieving stuff from the middle compared to the edges.
And when we talk about retrieving information, we're talking about how the AI processes the text, the tokens, right?
Exactly. Tokens are just the pieces of text words, parts of words that the AI looks at, and the ones in the middle seem to get less weight.
Okay, that definitely sounds like a serious issue. So here's where it gets really interesting for me. Why? Why do these LLMs get biased like this? You mentioned architecture.
Precisely. It comes down to the very foundation, the transformer architecture that powers most of these models.
Your transformer. Right.
The problem is baked deep into how they're built, specifically their attention mechanism. You can kind of think of that as the LLM's internal spotlight.
Okay, a spotlight.
Yeah. It's designed to shine on the most relevant tokens, weigh their importance. But the very design choices made to make transformers work well, things like attention masks and positional encodings, they inadvertently create this bias. It's like the spotlight naturally favors the edges of the stage.
Okay, let's break that down. Attention masks first. What are they, and how do they mess things up?
Sure. So one really common type is the causal mask. It's built for efficiency, especially when generating text. It basically means a token can only look at or attend to tokens that came before it.
Big reading left to right, you can't see ahead.
Exactly. Think of reading a book, word by word, always moving forward. The MIT research shows this inherently skews attention towards the beginning of the input, like remembering the first items on a long list,
Makes sense.
And what's more, as these models get deeper, meaning they have more layers, this bias actually gets stronger. It reinforces that preference for the early stuff.
Wow. So more layers can make it worse.
In this case, yes. They even found these masks can create what they call attention sinks.
Attention sinks, like a whirlpool for attention.
Kind of. Specific spots, usually right at the very beginning, that just suck up a ton of attention, whether the content there is actually important or not.
So even if the crucial detail is way down the page, that first sentence or token just hogs the limelight, that's quite a built-in advantage. Are there other types of masks?
Yeah, there's also the sliding window mask. This tries to limit the context, so the token only attends to tokens within a certain window nearby.
Does that help with the bias?
It helps a bit, but the experiments showed that the absolute first token of the whole sequence still tends to dominate as you go through the layers. Even with that limited view, the starting position holds special power. It's like an old habit dying hard.
Okay. And you mentioned a prefix mask, too. How's that different?
Right, the prefix mask works a bit differently. If you designate the first, say, K tokens, maybe the first paragraph or the instructions as a prefix, then the bias spreads across all those K tokens.
Ah, so not just the very first word, but the whole introductory block.
Exactly. All the later tokens are designed to pay close attention to that whole starting set. So you give it a specific prompt, it really focuses on that prompt.
Okay, so the masks kind of dictate how the spotlight works, how it scans. But what about just where a word is in the sentence? That's positional encodings, right? The AI's internal GPS.
You got it. Positional encodings, or PEs, are basically number signals added to tell the model where each token sits in the sequence. Super important for understanding word order.
And they're meant to help with this position bias problem.
They are meant to alleviate it, yeah. But the MIT study found they don't completely eliminate it. Especially in those deeper models, the extra layers can still amplify the importance of the early positions more than they should.
It seems like deeper models keeps coming up as an issue here.
It's a recurring theme. The complexity adds power, but also amplifies some of these underlying tendencies.
Are there different kinds of these PEs, these GPS systems?
Yes, definitely. For instance, there's something called the decay mask PE. This explicitly tries to make the influence of tokens fade based on distance within a layer. So recent tokens are favored locally.
Like the signal gets weaker the further back you go?
Sort of, yeah. But here's the trade-off. Even with that local decay, the cumulative importance of being in an early position across all the layers can still win out. So its early advantage ripples through.
Complex. What else?
Another really common one now is rotary positional encoding, or ROPE. You see this in a lot of modern LLMs.
Rope E, right. Heard of that one.
ROPE also introduces a distance-based decay, but it's generally much more gradual. But here's the interesting part again. With ROPE, in deeper models, the sheer number of attention layers can actually end up making the model more biased towards the initial tokens, despite that gentle local decay.
So even rope E isn't a magic bullet for this.
It seems not, especially with depth. And the experiments really highlighted the role of residual connections, too.
Residual connections. Remind me.
Think of them like information shortcuts, helping signals skip over layers to flow more directly through the network. They're crucial for training deep models.
Right. And how do they affect the bias?
Well, without them, deeper models consistently made the bias toward early tokens worse. With residual connections, it was more complex. They found a non-trivial sort of up and down relationship. Sometimes residuals reduced bias, sometimes they amplified it, depending on the PE and the depth.
So no simple fix there either. It sounds incredibly tricky to even measure this stuff accurately inside such a complex system. How did the MIT team actually pin down this lost in the middle effect?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is complex. Their big breakthrough was developing a novel graph-based theoretical framework.
A graph framework, like nodes and edges.
Exactly. They essentially abstracted the attention network into a mathematical graph. This let them model and trace precisely how information flows or spreads and how these biases build up layer by layer. It's a really elegant way to get a handle on the dynamics.
Okay, so they had a theory, a map.
And then they tested it rigorously. They set up experiments, specifically an information retrieval task. They'd feed the model text and systematically change where the correct answer was located, beginning, middle, end.
And what happened?
They consistently found this really distinctive U-shaped curve in accuracy. The model did great finding answers at the start, pretty good at the end, but accuracy dropped significantly, noticeably, right in the middle.
The lost in the middle pattern, clear as a day.
Exactly. It directly backed up their theoretical analysis. Strong empirical evidence.
Okay, wait a second. That U-shaped curve, highest at the beginning and end, dipping in the middle, that sounds uncannily like how we remember things, like lists or presentations.
You absolutely nailed it. That's one of the most fascinating connections here. It turns out this U-shaped lost-in-the-middle phenomenon in their experiments showed up only when the training data itself had a bias towards information at both the beginning and the end.
Whoa, so if the training data didn't have that pattern?
Then the U-shaped accuracy drop mostly disappeared, which strongly suggests the LLMs are, in part, learning this pattern from the data they're trained on.
Which is often human-generated text.
Precisely. And it connects directly to that well-known psychological effect, the primacy-recency effect. Humans naturally remember the first things, primacy, and the last things, recency, in a sequence better than the middle stuff. Think back to Glanzer and Kunitz's work in the 60s.
So the AI might just be mimicking our own cognitive quirks, our own biases, because it learned from our data.
It's a very strong possibility. It raises fascinating questions about how much AI is reflecting us, including our limitations.
That's kind of mind-bending. And it wasn't just the data content, right? You mentioned something about geometry.
Right. The experiments also showed that the task difficulty, finding that information, was affected by the geometry of the token embeddings.
Embeddings. The way the AI represents words internally.
Exactly. Think of it as the shape or map of words in the AI's mind. When these representations were more complex or anisotropic, the retrieval task got harder. So even the fundamental way words are encoded seems to play a role in this whole position bias puzzle.
Okay, this is all super interesting technically, but let's bring it back. What does this mean for, someone actually using these AI tools or building apps with them? Why should we care about this internal bias?
Yeah, connecting it to the bigger picture. The implications are, as the researchers say, far-reaching, especially when these tools are used in high-stakes
High
environments.
stakes like legal stuff, medicine.
Exactly. Imagine you're a lawyer using an AI assistant to review a massive contract or sift through affidavits. If that AI is prone to overlooking details buried in the middle.
It could miss a critical clause or some crucial bit of evidence.
Precisely. Leading to what the paper calls inconsistent or incomplete retrievals. In law, where every word can matter, that's a huge risk.
I can see that. And in medicine,
Similar concerns. If an AI is analyzing huge patient data sets or long medical histories, skipping over data points in the middle could lead to subtle but potentially really impactful errors in reasoning or even diagnosis.
okay, yeah, that's serious.
It really underscores what Ali Jadbabi, one of the senior authors, said. If you want to use a model in critical applications, you must understand when it will work, when it won't, and why.
So this research isn't just identifying a problem, it's giving us the understanding needed to use AI more responsibly.
Exactly. It empowers developers and users. We can anticipate these potential pitfalls, maybe adjust our workflows, like double-checking middle sections or structuring prompts differently. It makes us smarter users and creators.
Okay, so we understand the problem, we see the risks, but the research must also point towards solutions, right? How can we actually fix this bias or at least reduce it?
Definitely. The findings really demand, as the paper puts it, a reconsideration of commonly accepted transformer design principles. It pushes us to rethink how these models are built.
So starting with the architecture itself.
Right, one avenue is architectural adjustments, maybe tweaking those attention masks we talked about,
Right.
perhaps softening the strict left-to-right causal mask, or maybe incorporating more bidirectional mechanisms so information from the middle flows better in both directions.
Letting the spotlight scan more freely, basically.
Kinda, yeah. Or it could involve redesigning the positional encodings, the PEs, to give a more balanced sense of the whole sequence, not overweighting the start.
So re-engineering the core components. What else?
The other major piece is the training data. We saw how data patterns seem to influence the bias. So carefully curating or fine-tuning the training data to ensure a more balanced representation of information across all positions could be really important.
Fighting fire with fire, if biased data contributes, maybe better data can fix it.
That's the idea. It's likely a combination of architectural fixes and better data practices will be needed.
Okay, that's about fixing it. But you hinted earlier, could we maybe flip this? Could this bias actually be useful sometimes?
That's a really interesting angle, and yes, the researchers touch on that. This discovery, understanding the bias,
Yeah.
it opens intriguing avenues for future research.
Huh.
Well, could we potentially harness this bias for tasks where focusing on the beginning or end is actually what you want?
Like summarizing an article. The main points are often in the intro and conclusion.
Exactly. For text summarization, maybe an LLM that naturally gives more weight to the start and end could actually perform better or at least be more efficient. It's about understanding the tool's properties and matching them to the task.
Using the bias to our advantage. Clever.
It's a possibility worth exploring. But ultimately, the biggest value of this study is transparency. It's a really significant step toward demystifying the black box nature of LLMs.
Lifting the lid a bit.
Yeah, and that understanding is absolutely essential for building trust and ensuring these AI systems are effective, especially as we rely on them for more critical decisions.
This has been incredibly insightful. So just to recap, position bias, this lost in the middle effect, it's a real fundamental challenge baked into LLMs, stemming from their architecture, maybe amplified by training data.
Right, with significant real-world consequences, especially in sensitive areas.
But the good news is researchers are on it. They're figuring out why it happens and exploring ways to fix it through both better model design and smarter data handling.
Exactly. And maybe even finding clever ways to use the bias.
It really shows how complex these systems are.
It does. And, this research reveals how deep these structural biases can run in AI. But it also makes you think, doesn't it? Given that we have the primacy-recency effect in our own cognition, how closely should AI actually mimic human patterns, including our flaws, to be truly effective?
That's a deep question. Do we want AI to be perfectly rational or more? Human-like biases and all.
And maybe, by studying these biases that emerge in AI trained on our data, What can we learn about our own minds, our own cognitive shortcuts and limitations? A fascinating mirror, in a way.